This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppe, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. On the last show, we talked with Leo Rout and Cameron Gauntz on identity and mindset and how it can help define a new purpose after an injury or someone suffering from pain, especially someone from a directive institutionalized culture such as veterans and professional athletes. So we had a good talk on that show and some good information to help a person who's going through the transition, so tune in and listen to that show. When someone suffers from chronic pain, they may look for alternative ways to manage the pain. Yoga is one of those ways, but does it really help? On today's show, we'll discuss the scientific evidence for yoga as a pain management tool. Today, I'm joined by Neil Pearson, a physiotherapist and adjunct professor at the University of British Colombia. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tom. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on the show. So, Neil, we hear a lot about yoga. I've done yoga myself. Does it really help with chronic pain, and what are the benefits of it?
Yeah, well, we can jump right into the science around this, but I just want to take one step back and say that one of the really important things to consider is, are we talking about adding yoga into more conventional pain management or pain care? Or are we considering yoga as something that would be done all by itself? And the science actually hasn't sort of helped us with answering those questions yet, but the science would be more likely to support the idea of not using yoga as an alternative, but using yoga as something to add into the other best practice care that we have. I think that's a really important piece to get. Yet, if you look at yoga for veterans sort of more globally in North America, you see that a lot of the yoga is yoga classes for well-being, whereas the research has been much more focused on if you have a group of people, of veterans who have chronic pain, and you modify the yoga practice to suit the veterans. So if you understand veterans and if you understand chronic pain, how could you actually modify the yoga that you provide to suit that population? Whereas if you go to a yoga class in the community, anyone who's done that will have noticed is you're sort of asked to modify yourself to fit with what's being taught. Whereas the research has really looked at this other way of, if we understand veterans better and if we understand pain science and pain care better, can we provide yoga intervention that would help?
Yeah, no. So what I'm hearing you say is understand veterans. And what do you mean by understand veterans? What's the research looking at that?
There were 3 research studies that I found that specifically considered focus groups or talking to individual veterans and about their experience with yoga. What would be the barriers for them going to it, which are mostly misconception about what yoga really is. And then other barriers were just being able to find a class. Other barriers were the veterans needing to feel that the teachers actually understood them. And so you can see that there's some evidence that would suggest that it would be really great if people teaching yoga to veterans knew something about military culture, knew something about what it's like to be in the military and be injured and then move into being a veteran, to understand, as you and I have talked about before, that very mission-focused approach to things, which is pretty important because there's a lot of language in yoga that suggests that what you need to do as a student in the yoga class is to actually learn to pay attention to the subtle sensations of yourself, right? And so a person who would understand veterans might understand the idea that if you show a veteran a posture, say a yoga posture to do, or give them a practice to do, what the veteran might do is what they've been trained to do is just get it done and ignore self in the process of getting the posture done or the technique done. I mean, this becomes important because one of the yogic views would be that everything can be medicine and everything can be poison. Or to say that in a different way, everything within yoga could provide or create an adverse effect in a person. The postures could create an adverse effect on the body. The contemplative or meditation practices could create an adverse cognitive or emotional effect. Being in a group of other people could cause an adverse, social engagement or community kind of effect. So there's when we understand veterans, we sort of get an understanding of what it was that the military service trained the person to do and how to approach activity. And then to start to recognize that, like, even just, one specific thing is this idea of getting a person to pay attention to say, muscle tension in their body while they're doing something. And when we have veterans and high performance athletes, I know you talked a little bit about this last time, is that we have this idea of just get it done, ignore self because the mission is important or the outcomes was important. And a yoga teacher teaching veterans probably should know that and sort of modify their language.
Yeah, and I think that's, it always goes back to the identity and culture. So that makes sense. You want to specifically make it for veterans. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the research and the science,
Sure.
for yoga supporting chronic pain and where you're heading with that.
Great. So we can look at two different places. We just did a scoping review where we looked specifically at the research of yoga for veterans with chronic pain. So I'm going to come to that second because there's this bigger body of evidence looking at yoga for people who are living with chronic pain. So say civilians, right? So in most of those studies, they never tell you whether somebody was a veteran. So there may have been some veterans in there, but it was probably primarily a civilian population. And if you look there, you see that there are consistent findings that people with chronic pain, no matter whether it's osteoarthritis or it's rheumatoid arthritis or it's low back pain or whiplash associated disorder or even fibromyalgia, that so many different chronic pain conditions, when people practice yoga for sort of 8 to 12 weeks on a consistent basis, now that's what the research is looking at, is that what you see is small to moderate effects across the biopsychosocial spiritual aspects or realms. And you also see very, very few adverse events in the research studies. So a lot of people hear that and go, oh, mild to moderate effects. That doesn't sound all that great. But mild to moderate effects in pain and pain-related functioning or pain-related disability, mild to moderate effects in a person's anxiety or grief process or depression, and mild to moderate effects in medication use. Right? So you start to see this mild to moderate effect across all those areas, which then, and the fact that it doesn't cost a lot and it's actually got low adverse effects, would suggest that this is actually a really great thing to add in to what we're doing in the general population. We then look in the research that looked at yoga for veterans who have chronic pain. Most of that research was actually done specifically on low back pain. There were some studies that looked at chronic pain more generally, but there's only actually 16 studies that have actually looked at yoga for veterans with chronic pain. 3 of them were qualitative, where they're interviewing people, and then the other 13 were where they're doing the more standard, randomized controlled trial statistics things. But they all found similar results to what they found in the civilians as well, across the different realms. Now, as I say that, being a sort of science geek, I need to point out is that it's only 13 studies, right? And in science, we looked for, can you replicate the study? And this actually was one of the big things in the scoping review that we found, was that the way that most of the studies were reported, you could not replicate them because you didn't quite know what happened in that 60 to 90-minute class. They gave an outline of the classes, but there's so much language that's used in there. Yoga teachers tend to ask people to think about non-harm and contentment and a whole bunch of different things in the midst of asking you to do breath work and meditation and postures. So without that information, we can't replicate it. And the good news side of this is that there now are measurement tools that you can use so that the researcher could sort of fill out this tool. And so anybody else coming along would be able to say, okay, that's exactly what they did within their research, and we can now actually replicate that.
So I have 2 questions for you. One, there's moderate improvement
Yes.
from what the research is showing.
Yes.
And does it matter the type of yoga? I mean, there's different types of yoga, right? Or is that the other issue to kind of having a control factor of saying, does this really work for chronic pain if you're using different styles?
Yeah, we don't know. The research hasn't gone that far. Most of the research has been done on the more gentle yogas. So no one's done, really hot yoga, or no one's done Ashtanga yoga, which is very sort of gymnastic, acrobatic almost kind of things. No one's looked at that. But one thing I'd add about this is that I once got asked about civilians with chronic pain, what yoga would I suggest they don't do? And the person was actually specifically asking about fibromyalgia. And it was one of those questions, it was actually a radio interview, and I probably shouldn't have answered it the way I did. But I said, well, if someone had fibromyalgia, I probably would suggest that they don't do the hot, really energetic yogas and things like Ashtanga, which is, it's not hot, but it's very energetic. And what was really amazing to me and a great learning experience was the next day I got some emails and I got a couple phone calls. And there was this consistent message from people saying, don't tell the world that because, and this, as one woman said, I tried all the mamby-pamby restorative, relaxing kind of yoga things and nothing happened. Nothing positive happened until I walked into an Ashtanga class. And ever since that, my fibromyalgia has been improving. I'm starting to get my life back. And I think that this becomes the important part that the research needs to tell us yet is it's probably, I'm sort of throwing out hypothesis here, right? It's probably like exercise. If you look in the research around exercise for people with chronic pain, the kind of exercise you get people to do doesn't matter. The outcomes are almost the same when you look at it at like 100 people doing it. You're going to get the same as if you do strengthening or stretch-based exercise, or if you do Feldenkrais exercise, no matter what you do. And so we may see that same thing when we start studying different styles or lineages of yoga. And if you look at the exercise stuff, it really clearly says the best exercise is the exercise that you will do and you want to do. So, if you were to recommend a certain kind of yoga, I'd say it was like, go try some different classes and find the one that you feel like, yeah, that's for me. I'll do this.
Yeah, you get moving, get doing something, and it goes back to the what you touched on was the biopsychosocial of pain, right? Our mind and body connection. So, is it a placebo effect, or is it regardless of what you do, does it make you feel better? And I mean, once you're moving,
Hmm.
we always know that. I mean, that's what we're doing with our veteran program, our Alpine Challenge, which is getting people moving
Yeah.
again. Because I found when I've done some yoga, it all depends how you're moving. It may kind of flare up the low back a bit, but is that because of the movement, or is that because maybe your body's saying this doesn't feel safe, but it really isn't, or it is.
And actually, if I can jump back to one other thing too, is when we talk about mild to moderate effects, if you look at the effect size of opioids, opioids have a moderate effect size on pain and function when we have chronic pain. So often when we hear that mild to moderate, we think that's not great, but compare it over to opioids, and opioids are still moderate. So, and of course, with the thing that we know is that the majority of people with opioids, of course, have, if you continue to take them, you get adverse effects, right? And just make sure everyone understands, I'm not saying that that's bad, right? We want to use these things the right way. And there are some people who are going to need to have medication management and other techniques like yoga together.
Yeah, and I mean be interesting to see because you're doing this research project now, right? Or it has it been completed, or it's
The scoping review has been completed now. Yeah.
yeah. So from that, you've seen that you're getting moderate impact or effects on yoga too.
Yes.
But now, if you tie that to the I know you wanted to touch on that, the biopsychosocial and how it connects to yoga. So maybe you can kind of go into that a little bit.
Sure. There seems to be something important about the approach to movements, or the way that we do it. That when you get a person to do movement from this more body mind approach or a biopsychosocial approach, where the person is saying it's not just about what I do with my body, it's what I do with my thinking while I'm doing this, it's what I do with my emotions while I do with this, right? It's what I do with the way I breathe and my muscle tension. Which, if you're hearing that and you've done yoga before, this is the kind of stuff that yoga includes. And so one of the things we wonder about is that if you get people to approach the movement with an approach that we would say is a specifically biopsychosocial or biopsychosocial spiritual, would you get a better effect? And of course, the research would probably say we're probably going to find for some people it does, and other people it doesn't. And as a physical therapist, what I find is that when I'm seeing people with chronic pain, it's usually because they've seen a lot of other physical therapists before, and so they're trying again to see, can this guy give me some extra help? And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll get a person to show me their exercise. I'll say, show me the exercise, like somebody gave you exercise for, say, your shoulder.
Hmm.
So show me what they are. which usually gets people to pull a piece of paper out and show me the exercise. And I'm like, actually, no, I want you to show me you doing the exercise. That's what I want to see. And a lot of times people are say moving their shoulder, but while they're doing it, they're tensing their body and they're holding their breath, which we believe from other science that when you do these things that you are actually increasing the evidence of danger, right? So the systems of us are always paying attention to, is there safety, is there danger? And they're paying attention to everything outside and everything inside for that data. So we know when there's dangerous things, you'll hold your breath and your body will tense up, but we know that goes the other way as well. If you hold your breath and tense your body up, you now are changing your physiology in a way that the systems of you think that there's danger and you need to be protected. If you have pain already, we believe that if there's more evidence of danger, you're going to have more pain with this movement.
And that's where the mind body connection comes in, right? Where your body.
Absolutely.
Trying to think of his name now. He did that YouTube out of Australia on pain.
Lorimer Moseley.
Yes, yes. Where he talks about the injury's healed, it's gone, but next time you scrape yourself in the same spot, it's going to be like
Right.
devastating injury, right? So I get what you're saying.
It could be.
Could be, right? Or at least that's that sensation your mind's telling you. So I understand the whole contractional muscles and that. So with yoga, so what I hear you saying is there's the movements, but there's this whole piece of whole component of mindfulness and breath, which the research shows is helpful. If we read some of the research, right?
Yeah.
So really is like you're saying, what I hear you saying, is it the movement or is it the breath work and mindfulness or is the combination of the two, right? Is that where you're going with that?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the important thing for us to know is that it's as if when we have chronic pain, sometimes you just move and you get better. But there are other times then movement by itself isn't enough. And that's when we think that we need to pay more attention to these other things. And as another advantage of yoga, if you're doing a yoga in a class with a group of people that you really like, that changes your physiology. Like we know this from science, right? So you'll get more things like more endorphins and possibly more dopamine, which are chemicals that can help you have less pain. And of course, if you can have less pain while you're moving, then you're teaching the protective systems they don't need to protect you so much, but you're also providing a physical force to your body that will help your body get healthier again. So there's the added when you add these two together. And there's one other piece of yoga that a lot of veterans are really attracted to or are really getting, saying they're getting benefit from. And it's the meditation, but part of yoga, but this very specific kind called yoga nidra. Yoga nidra is a technique. It's like a guided visualization and body scan where you, as the veteran or the practitioner, get to lay down in a comfortable position, and your job is to do one thing: it's to listen to the sound of the voice of the instructor, who takes you through this process. And the science of this is really fascinating because what they've shown is that we actually enter into, we engage with this, we enter into a different state of awareness. The brain waves are different and our physiology of our body starts to change in a way. The yogis said it was, well, actually they talk about it being a different state of awareness, and the research supports that it is. But there's this feeling of peacefulness that you get. And I think that's another thing that yoga provides that general exercise tends not to, is it helps you to feel a sense of ease again. And when you have chronic pain, you're fighting all the time to try to get the pain go away, and often you really are not getting a connection to peacefulness, which is sometimes what we need to do to be able to move forward.
It doesn't matter if it's civilians or if it's veterans. If you have type A personalities, or that are go and pushing, it's hard to get that peacefulness. So we got about 30 seconds, and if you were to leave a nugget that would help somebody, what would that be?
Well, a nugget about yoga, I guess the nugget would be, even if you're a skeptic, know that veterans who are skeptics or have been skeptics have clearly said is once they started into practicing yoga and doing it consistently, that's when they started to get the really good effects. So maybe the nugget is try to get over your skepticism, and when you try yoga, think of it as a skill, and you're going to need to practice it a certain number of weeks before you start to get the really good effects. So if you get good effects day one, awesome. You're going to get great effects down the road, because you're going to get better at it.
So stick with it and start moving.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what kind of movement you do, that's the answer.
Well, Neil, great to have you on the show. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Tom. I hope it's helpful for veterans.
For feedback on the show, more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website, veteranschronicpain.ca, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Chronic Pain COE and on Instagram at chronicpain_COE. Thanks again for tuning in. Keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast
is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.